The morning sun poured golden light over the city, casting long shadows on the glass and steel towers. Michael Carter's black luxury sedan slid to a stop in front of the tallest building in sight, its sleek curves reflecting the busy streets around it. He stepped out sharply, the shine of his polished shoes matching the precision in his movements. At just 32, Michael was the youngest self-made millionaire CEO in the city, a man who had built his empire through relentless ambition and tireless work. But today, that empire balanced on the edge of a single meeting, one that could determine the fate of his company for years to come. He glanced at his watch and felt the tension coil tighter in his chest. He was already late. His phone buzzed relentlessly with urgent messages, updates from his assistant, reminders from the board, questions from investors. Each vibration was another pull toward the revolving glass doors just ahead. He adjusted his tie and quickened his steps, the clatter of his shoes echoing against the marble plaza. Around him, the city pulsed with motion, commuters rushing, cars honking, street vendors calling out, but all of it blurred into background noise. His mind was a sharp tunnel focused on that meeting room, the charts, the negotiations, and the high-stakes decisions that awaited him inside. This was not the day to be distracted. Yet, even as he moved with purpose, something unexpected tugged at the corner of his vision, a small, almost imperceptible detail that didn't belong in the rhythm of corporate urgency. He forced himself to ignore it, to keep his focus forward. But that tug, faint and persistent, was about to pull him in a direction that would change far more than the outcome of any meeting. Halfway across the wide, echoing plaza, Michael's eyes caught a flicker of movement, two small shapes pressed together near a weathered bench. At first, they seemed like a blur in the periphery of his vision, something his mind almost dismissed. But as he drew closer, the details sharpened. Two little girls, identical in every way, sat huddled, knees tucked under their chins, clutching each other as if the world might swallow them whole. They couldn't have been more than 6 years old. Their matching pink jackets, once bright, were now dulled with dust. Stray wisps of hair clung to tear-streaked cheeks, and their tiny hands were chapped red from the cold morning air. Their eyes, wide, glassy, and glistening with fear, lifted for a moment to meet his. That single glance pierced through him in a way he couldn't quite explain. The crowd moved around them like a river parting around two unnoticed stones. Men in suits hurried by, heads down, earbuds in. Women carrying coffee cups stepped wide to avoid them. No one stopped. No one even slowed. Michael's chest tightened. His meeting was in 5 minutes. 5 minutes that could mean millions for his company. Logic screamed for him to keep moving, to let someone else handle it. But his feet didn't listen. Instead, they slowed, the crisp rhythm of his stride faltering until he found himself standing still, the sound of the city fading into a dull hum. Something in those tear-filled eyes anchored him to the spot, stronger than any sense of urgency or ambition. Without meaning to, Michael realized he'd crossed an invisible line in his morning, a moment when a choice had to be made, and either decision would change everything. Michael stepped closer, his polished shoes now inches from the dusty pavement where the twins sat. He lowered himself to one knee, trying to make his tall frame less intimidating. His voice, usually sharp and commanding in boardrooms, softened into something warm and careful. "Hey," he said gently, "are you two okay? Where's your mom or dad?" The girls exchanged a frightened glance before one of them spoke, her voice trembling. We were with Grandma at the market. But, there were so many people, and we couldn't find her." Her sister buried her face into her shoulder, sobbing harder. A pang hit Michael in a place he rarely let himself feel. For a brief moment, the cold skyscrapers and corporate deadlines vanished, replaced by the memory of himself at their age, lost in a crowded street, clutching his little sister's hand, hoping someone would help. The ache was as real now as it had been then. He exhaled slowly, torn between the meeting that could shape his career and the two small lives trembling before him. His phone buzzed again, the screen lighting up with his assistant's name. Without looking at the message, he swiped past it and tapped the keypad instead. "Hi, yes," he said into the phone, his eyes never leaving the girls. "I've found 2 children who are lost. Yes, I'll stay with them until you arrive." The call ended, but Michael didn't move away. He simply stood there, a silent guardian against the tide of strangers rushing past. In that moment, every tick of the clock felt different, not like time wasted, but time given. About 10 minutes later, the distant shuffle of hurried footsteps caught Michael's ear. He turned just in time to see an elderly woman pushing through the crowd, her hair disheveled, her face streaked with tears. She looked around desperately until her gaze landed on the twins. In an instant, the girls' heads snapped up. "Grandma," they squealed in unison, breaking free from Michael's gentle hold. Their little feet pounded against the stone as they ran, arms outstretched, straight into her embrace. The woman dropped to her knees, clutching them so tightly it was as if she feared they might vanish. Her voice shook as she murmured words of comfort, kissing their hair, her own sobs mingling with their laughter of relief. When she finally looked up, her eyes found Michael. She rose, still holding the girl's hands, and hurried over. "Thank you, oh, thank you," she said breathlessly, her voice cracking under the weight of gratitude. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Michael offered a small smile and shook his head. "I'm just glad they're safe," he replied, brushing it off as though it were nothing. But inside, something deep and unfamiliar stirred, a warmth that wasn't born of victory or wealth, but of connection. As the trio turned to leave, the twins glanced back, smiling through their tear-stained faces. Michael watched them disappear into the crowd, their tiny hands locked in their grandmother's grip. For reasons he couldn't fully explain, he felt lighter than he had in years. The plaza seemed quieter, the air softer, as if the city itself had taken a pause to breathe. Michael stepped into the glass-walled boardroom nearly 20 minutes late, his hair slightly windblown, the sharp crease of his suit jacket softened from kneeling on the plaza. Conversations hushed for a moment, a few eyebrows raised at his tardiness, but the meeting pressed on without pause. Charts flickered on the projector, numbers danced across screens, and voices droned about projections, market shares, and investor expectations. He took his seat at the head of the table, nodding politely, but the words around him seemed distant, muffled, like an echo from another room. His mind wasn't on quarterly growth or the negotiation strategies they had rehearsed. It was on 2 small figures in pink jackets, on tear-filled eyes that had looked up at him with hope, and on the moment they had run into their grandmother's arms. In all his years of chasing success, Michael had measured his worth by contracts signed, deals closed, and the balance of his bank account. Yet, sitting there surrounded by polished suits and million-dollar ideas, he realized those measures suddenly felt hollow compared to the simple joy of reuniting 2 lost children with the person they loved most. True wealth, he now understood, wasn't a number you could calculate or a trophy you could display. It was the quiet satisfaction of knowing you'd made a difference, however small, in someone else's world. As the meeting continued, Michael leaned back in his chair, the faintest smile tugging at his lips. That day, he made himself a promise: no matter how busy life became, no matter how high the stakes in business, he would never again be too busy to help someone in need. And for the first time in a long while, he felt richer than ever. Michael's morning had begun like so many others, driven by urgency, defined by ambition, and ruled by the ticking of the clock. But a chance encounter with 2 frightened little girls had pulled him off the well-worn path of deadlines and deals, forcing him to choose between business and compassion. In choosing the latter, he not only reunited a family but rediscovered a part of himself he'd long buried beneath the weight of success. The experience reminded him that the most meaningful victories aren't celebrated in boardrooms or reflected in bank statements, they are felt in the moments when you step outside of your own world to touch someone else's. For Michael, that morning wasn't just about helping 2 lost children find their grandmother. It was about finding his own sense of humanity again. In the end, he walked away with something far more valuable than the outcome of any meeting: the unshakable truth that kindness is the greatest measure of wealth, and that no matter how fast life moves, there is always time to stop and help.